All right, I'm Coach Dana Cavalea, and I'm happy to be here with you today. I'm the author of the book, Habits of a Champion and High Performance Coach. And some great advice that I got was from the great Reggie Jackson, Hall of Famer. And he once told me, Dana, you can't get there yet. As I was looking at his Rolex Daytona about 10 years ago in the clubhouse in Boston. And he said, you can't get there yet, but that doesn't mean you can't get there. You just can't get there yet. So be patient and your day will come.
I love that. That's great advice. So, Reggie Jackson on the straw that stirs the drink, Mr. October.
Oh,
So
yeah.
how did you get to meet Reggie? Was it a Yankees thing or what how'd that
Well,
happen?
yeah, Reggie, I've spent my career with the Yankees as a director of strength and conditioning and performance. And Reggie was always around, so he would always be in the weight room during the game. And usually talking smack about how the team is playing and how if he was playing, every ball hit would have been out of the yard. But so that's typical Reggie. But in having him around, we also gave him a nickname, and the nickname was we called him the Humbler because he would walk around and just literally humble people. If he saw anybody acting up, he would humble them, and ask them a question that would pretty much stop them in their tracks. So a lot of guys didn't like that, but a lot of guys appreciated it. And, they found somewhat of a lightning and comic relief when Reggie was around. So he'd always be around. That particular night, it was a Sunday evening in Boston. We were sitting in the manager's office off the clubhouse. And, I said, Reg, that's a nice watch you got there. And he says, it is, isn't it? He goes, this is a Rolex Daytona. And he gave me the year. And I said, how much does something like that cost? And he says, you know what? You can't get there yet. So he sized me up pretty quickly. But he was also encouraging on the other end. I had one of those interesting relationships with Reggie. It started off back in the day. He'd come in the weight room and want to train, and he'd bust my chops about everything. And I had the guy that I worked under when I first began, Jeff Mangold, say, Reg, you can't talk to him like that. And actually, from that point forward, he never did. And we actually had a great relationship. So pretty cool how that works.
Yeah, that is cool how it works. So tell me how the word yet is such great advice because that's what stuck out for me when I read your book.
Well, because you think about life, right? We always want to be oftentimes somewhere we are not yet, right? So, if you write a book, you want to be a bestseller. Maybe your first one won't get you there. If you're a speaker, maybe you want to do X amount of jobs a year or gigs a year, and you want to speak on certain stages. And when you start off, you can't get there yet. So everything is about, here's where I am now, and here's where I want to be. But there's that yet. It's not that you can't get there. You may just not be there now. That doesn't mean it's a permanent state. So that's why I put that in there. It was sort of the grand finale, extra bonus of the book, but it's advice that I use myself, and I oftentimes have to remind myself of.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So the book is fantastic. So lots of great
Thank you.
habits in here. I'm going to talk about a couple, but before we jam into those, I got to ask, Coach, can you actually coach habits, or is that something that people have or they don't?
Well, it's interesting. I, it's a very interesting question. I think habits are the result of how you're raised and the environment and the environments that you're raised and that you put yourself in. So if you hang around people where, let's say, health and fitness and nutrition is not something that's very important, it's probably not going to be that important to you. So your habits are going to reflect that. If you're raised in a geography that, again, where that's not a priority and vanity is not a part of things, you're probably not going to care as much. Where when you're brought up in, say, let's say certain areas of Miami, you're going to be very conscious of many of those things. So it's just really how you're brought up, and I think that determines what your baseline of habits are. But every habit can change. You can change every habit that you have. Right now, I'm taking a group of 20 people through a weight loss and physical and health reset, and all of them, no matter what their issue is, whether they're dealing with diabetes or neuropathy or whatever it may be, or they just want to improve their energy, they're all improving in just a 7-day time because We took all of their habits, all of their associations, and we flipped them upside down and said, okay, these don't exist anymore. Now, this is what I want you to do. So you give people direction, you give them structure, you give them bumpers and guidelines and guardrails, and they could do really, really well. It's just amazing because many people today, they don't want that sort of discipline. And when I coach people, I say, listen, you don't need discipline. You need a plan. So if I give you a plan and all you have to do is work the plan, and I'm here to work it with you, you'll get the result. And the more results you get, the more disciplined you become. Most people think
Mm.
you have to start with discipline. I believe discipline is obtained as you go. It gets stronger and stronger and greater.
Wow, that is interesting. I have not heard
Yeah.
that before. That's a new way to think. So with that, if it gets stronger and stronger as we go, 7 days. I mean, I've often read that 66 days it takes to build a habit, or 27 days, or what? 7 days, is that the jump start, or is that enough to keep it
So,
going, man?
so I'm taking them, what I'm doing is I'm taking them through 30 days, right? 30 days. So we're 7 days in on our 30. But
Oh,
what we
gotcha.
did
Okay,
was we took all of their habits and just literally flipped them upside down and hit control alt delete on their mind and how they typically do things, and reestablish new ways of doing things. And the way I do it, again, we're just talking about the weight loss and, improvement of physicality and energy, is I actually work them from more of a cellular biochemical level. So, and the thought process in a very simple way is this: if I take the craving away at that root level, you don't need willpower in order to resist the craving. Your body won't want it. So let's say sugar and salt are your two most desirable things, and today sugar and salt is usually carbs and, chips and things like that. If I could make you not want them because I've changed your chemistry by giving you more nutrients, you're not going to crave those things. You may see them and say, oh, I used to like chips, but I don't really want it. That's the whole idea here. And then you could do that with most things, right? You could turn most habits upside down just by challenging somebody's current belief structure around those habits. It's like, how many leaders do you meet that are like, oh, millennials, they're horrible? Nobody today.
sure.
I hear everybody say this: nobody today wants to work. Well, nobody, that's false, right? And nobody wants to work, that's not true. But we have to stop saying these things because we believe them and we sync them into our operating system and structure. And that's where we have to start turning things over.
That's interesting. Yeah. So what comes out of our mouth, what we stick in our head, and who we spend time with, those are important things to do, right?
Yeah,
Those are the
Phil.
keys.
I remember playing the Toronto Blue Jays, right? We go up to Toronto from New York, where our team is stacked. You got Derek Jeter, you got Mark Teixeira, you got A-Rod, you have Jorge Posada, you have all these great hitters. And we were set to face AJ Burnett, pitcher for the Blue Jays, Roy Halladay, the late Roy Halladay, pitcher for the Blue Jays. These guys were aces. And I remember our team, even these great superstars, saying, we never hit these guys well. We'll probably lose the first two games and we'll have to hammer them on the last game of the series. And I'm like, what? Or we have to jump out early and get them early in order to win. And you know what? They made that dream come true every time. We always sucked those first two games when we had faced those two guys, unless they had a bad game and we got to the bullpen and we could beat them. But again, we went in psyching ourselves out that it was going to be difficult. It was going to be challenging. It was going to be, right? So going to be and yet are very similar as well. Like, how many things do we forecast incorrectly? Quite a few.
Yeah.
And then we
Yeah.
do it and we're like, wait, that wasn't that bad. So we're poor forecasters.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, that's a blessing and a curse, right? I mean, if it's if we can understand that we're poor forecasters, well, hope then that's changeable. Then we can change our habits. Then we can be better. But if we feel like that's set in stone, then we're stuck. And
Yeah.
stuck sucks, right?
Yep. And it's interesting. I find most people, what they do is they'll focus on the deficit naturally. Even when I talk to high level talent in sports, they're very aware of what they're bad at. When I talk to high performers, high achievers, whether it's a CEO I'm coaching or an executive, same kind of deal. They're very quick to point out what they're terrible at or where they're struggling or where the weakness is, and they lock in on that. So, it's important that we understand the weakness, we put a plan and a play to it, and we coach it and we correct as much as we can, but we can't obsess over it to the point where we associate ourselves as the weakness and the weakness becomes dominant,
Mm,
you know?
that's good. Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
totally know, and that's for me anyway. That's encouraging that we can do that, right? Because that gives us the agency to actually fix things and the agency to actually be better and excel at what we're already good at, right?
Yeah, because if you reinforce what you're bad at over and over and over and over again, it's harder to get good at it. It's like
It
I'm
is.
not good at this. I'm not good at that. I'm not good at this. I always struggle with this, right? It's like even like you have to abandon those mindsets.
Definitely, definitely. Well, let's talk a little more mindset here. One of my favorite players, and it gave you three things that he talked about. Mariano Rivera, probably the arguably the best relief pitcher ever in the history of baseball. The Sandman. You knew it was
Yeah.
over when he came in. Number 42, one of the last players to wear 42 once the Major League Baseball retired it. He said three things. He said you got to quiet the noise, you got to slow everything down, and you got to take it one pitch at a time. So talk to me about that, coach, right? Like quieting the noise, like break that down for me. What does quiet the noise mean and how do we do that?
Yeah. So I think a good setup to this is actually how that story originated, and I was a young guy watching Mariano come up and I saw this skinny guy from Panama in 1995 come into the league and he starts, he toes the mound and you're like, what's this guy going to do? And he sits back and he throws fire 96, 97 miles an hour when people really weren't throwing that hard. Pitchers weren't throwing that hard. And I was like, wow, this guy's incredible. And every year he got better and better and better. And you watched his disposition and his demeanor just almost be perfect as you could be, right? High stress, high pressure situation. So, I was living up in Westchester County in New York, and Mo calls me up. He says, hey, come to the house. I want you to stretch me. So I go to his house, go to the basement, and we're just chatting. And I'm like, Mo, I got to ask you something. Hey, listen, since the time I saw you toe the mound back in 95, like, how do you do it? And he goes, do what? Do what? And he has that sort of smug personality. And I said, how do you get it done in the biggest of situations? And he drops those three things on me, right? Quiet the noise, slow it down, one pitch at a time. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And I said, well, what about the big situations like the World Series, game on the line? And he goes, there are no big situations. Every situation is the same. We decide what's a big situation and we decide what it is that we give life to. And I said, wow, that's such like an unbelievable perspective. So when it comes to quieting the noise, the way he looks or looked at it is as if he's in control of the dial of the volume on the radio. So crowd noise may be up, internal noise may be elevating, but he actually believed that he controlled the dial. And you hear people talk a lot about, right, control the controllables. You got to control the controllables. Yet when the rubber hits the road, most people aren't controlling those controllables. They're letting the controllables control the controller. And that was a really a mindset that he had that, again, reinforced to myself. Like, I coach these guys, but they coached me as well. That you can be in control of really your just emotional state by controlling what it is that you allow yourself to think and the volume in which you're thinking those things.
Wow, that's incredible. That's power too, right? That's great power and great, maybe that's discipline, right? That we've learned from having a plan that we're going to turn it down, right?
Well, in sport, we talk a lot about routine. Like, and you're hearing a lot about it in, I guess, the personal development and personal growth space now over the last few years, but for a long time, players have routines. It's been like coaches engaging players would always say, "Hey, what's your routine? What's the routine? What do you got? What's the routine?" And the reason routine became and is so important in sport is because a good routine leads to good outcomes. execution of a consistent routine leads to predictable outcomes. And when you get paid to play, you need predictable outcomes. When the sport in which you play as a hitter is based on 7 failures to 3 successes and you're still a Hall of Famer, you need predictability of how you feel. You need emotional predictability. You need predictability of mindset and attitude. And then you need predictability of results, most importantly. So it's just something that we talk about a lot, and we engage players in routines. And if they don't have them or they need to be tuned up, we have to do it. It's very, very important, because without a good routine that is built, customized for you, the individual, not what that guy does or that thought leader does or that author does or whatever, every routine has to be built for you. So you own it. It's yours. Your stamp is on it. And you know that every piece, every part, and every element of that routine is designed and there to help you get predictable results. And
Wow.
I see a lot of cross pollination of routines these days. It's like, oh, I read this in the book. This guy gets up at 4 a.m. So I have to get up at 4 a.m. and then I'll be successful. And I challenge that all the time, because listen, I know billionaires that get up at 9 a.m., not because they're billionaires, because they do their best work between 9 and 7 p.m. Right. I know artists that are world renowned that do their best work between 10 p.m. and 2 in the morning. So there are no absolutes here outside of, you have to have a routine that is built and customized and designed for you. And then you have to execute the hell out of it.
Wow. So how do we get that built, coach? I mean, do we just have to hire a coach and make that happen? I mean, is there
Well,
a way that we can do that ourselves and kind of coach ourselves into a routine?
I always like to start it. Where are you feeling weak? Not strong. Where are you feeling weakness? And people are, like I said, they're really good at articulating the holes in their game. So if you could build the routine around filling the holes in somebody's game while also giving the strengths attention, um, that is a great starting point. Because if we know that we worked on the holes in our game, the holes don't become as big, right? And that means our focus isn't shifting there as much. So that's the point of origin. It's like, again, I go to weight loss, I'll go to energy. If you have low energy, you're going to have to go deep into your reserves in order to project and to get something done and to move through something. But if you articulate that to me and I say, hey, all right, Phil's got an energy problem. I have to figure out what's going on with his energy and build routine around it so he can have more sustainable energy. Then he won't have to dip into his reserves. Then he won't be in a fatigue cycle. If I can do that for you and build your routine around that outcome and objective, and now you work it and you get through it and you no longer deal with that, how are you going to perform? Better, more
Much better.
confidently, right? So the same is true for other parts of your game as well. So we're building routines around the parts of your game that you identify as weak. And then we layer on, we layer on, we layer on. And, I'm very big in what I call micro testing. And micro testing is saying, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to test this for 4 weeks. That's why when I said I'm taking this group of 20 through a 30-day program, it's because I'm testing them in a full spectrum for 30 days. I want to see your ability to be consistent. I want to see your ability to prepare. I want to see how you deal with failure. And I also want to see how you deal with success. And here's the modalities that we're going to use and the tools that we're going to use to help you get there. So, but we're testing them all along the way. It's like people say, you should meditate. Okay. In all of my years in being in professional sports, I had never seen one player meditate. It wasn't even a discussion point. Okay. With our players, that doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means not everybody has to do it. And it doesn't work for everybody. When you have a high performance, high octane, testosterone driven alpha athlete killing machine, right? That's paid to play, paid to win, plays for money, and is ultra competitive. Do you know how hard it is to take that person to 0?
Next to
They
impossible.
actually, yeah, they may rebel, and 0 or complete thought neutrality and slow waves may actually toy with them, which could alter their performance negatively. So I never generalize. And if a player comes to me or an executive comes to me and says, "Should I do this?" First thing I say is, "Let's test it. You got 4 weeks, but in that 4 weeks, you better be scheduled, you better be consistent, and you better do it with, the intensity and focus that it deserves." And then we make a decision. At the end of 4 weeks, if you say this did nothing for me, it's gone. And then we
Four
put stuff in
weeks.
place. 4 weeks.
Wow.
4-week micro test, 4 weeks. In 4 weeks, you can get a physical result. 4 weeks, you can get an emotional result. 4 weeks is enough time to test something.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about a couple more habits here, Coach, before we wrap here. So you say that it's important that we are all in, and I'm sure that's important when you're doing these testings. But what does all in mean, and why is that one of your critical things?
Yeah, so years ago, I was coaching one of my clients, Brandon Steiner, who started Steiner Sports and Collectibles, big brand, did really well. And before we engaged each other, right, in a working relationship, I was at his office, and he literally slides this rock across the table, and it says "all in." And he said, "If you're all in, I'm all in." And he goes, "You take that rock home." And I was like, "That is just really, really good." And it's true. I mean, how many things are we truly all in on? Are we all in on? Most of us are, we're playing with scraps. We're playing with leftovers. We're playing with whatever we have residually, as opposed to, hey, this is what I do and I'm all in on it. We diversify so much. We diversify our energy, we diversify our time. We're almost over diversified. Where the concept of all in is like, this is what I do and I'm all in on it. Right? I write books and I'm the best at it. The best I can be at it. Sometimes we can't control whether we're the best ever, right? Because there's a lot that goes into that. But I did my best because I was all in on that. It's just too many times we're kind of in. Again, I always like, I come from the world of performance. So I always am fascinated with weight loss, right? And physical improvement. And most people are not all in. If I were to ask somebody to do 30 jumping jacks for the next 30 days, you will be amazed at how many people cannot complete 30 for 30. They may go 27 for 30, 28 for 30, maybe 20 for 30. That's not bad, but it's not all in. All in is 30 for 30. You committed to 30 to 30. That's what you have to do. And I'm seeing it now, even with this group that I'm taking through. They can't go 30 days without a drink. They can't go 30 days without a simple added sugar, right? They can't do it. So they're not all in. They're kind of in. And in sports, we say you could be interested or you could be committed. You choose. Interested and all in, committed are two different things. And people that are all in, they could turn off a lot of people too because they're so intense. They just bring an energy and an air to them that most of the people out there can't hang with. Average people do average things. They find comfort in other average people, in other average habits, and other average behaviors. But if you want excellence, you have to demand it from yourself. And people may say, well, you have to also demand it from others. And that's where most people get let down because most people can't even get it out of themselves. And now they're expecting it from others. So, anyway, long winded there, but all in is all in. All in is I'm doing this and I'm seeing it to completion. And I will get the result that I desire, no matter what.
Mm.
And no matter how long it takes.
Uh, that's yeah. Those are tough. Most people aren't. They're interested. I'm interested in weight loss, right? They're not committed to it. So I
Well,
think
they're
that's
yeah,
a good
sometimes
example.
sometimes they're interested until somebody invites them to their favorite restaurant. I totally get it. right? Or they're interested until that pizza hits the table and it smells so damn good that you're like, ah. But I always tell people, listen, if you want to grow, you have to be in discomfort. And discomfort is looking at something and not allowing it to influence you. I think that's a big problem today just in society, is that there's too many influencers and people don't see themselves as the central point of influence on their own life.
I would agree with that. I see that very, very clearly. Often I see that. So that's strong. So one last habit here, because we could talk all day, Coach. I
Yeah.
appreciate all you've shared. The book is simple to read, but hard as hell to execute. I'm working through
Yeah.
it. So thank you for writing it. But let's talk about one maybe that maybe makes people a little more comfortable, but maybe not, as we wrap this up. And that is, off days are off days. That
I
one, I was like, ooh, okay. I mean, like when I read it, I'm like, all right, I get behind that. But then I read it, I'm like, I'm a little uncomfortable here. So talk to me about that, Coach.
I think that's probably one of the hardest ones in the book today, because it's like, what do we do with our time today? At the end of the day, if you're an achiever and you're used to being rewarded for achievement, what do you want to do more of? Achieve. So you're also going to do the activities that you associate with that achievement, and that becomes a vicious loop. And what happens is you end up working all the time. You're always on, you're always working. But coach, that's all in, isn't it? Well, as much as you're all in on the work, you also have to be all in on the out. So I have found that today there's a lot of talk about burnout. There's a lot of talk about stress, anxiety, fatigue in the workplace, and all these different things. And when people are on, much like you keep an electronic plugged in for 20 years, eventually it's going to burn out and you're going to have to get a new one. Unfortunately, with us, we can't just get a new one, right? We can't just reset ourselves by changing out parts and components. We actually, when people get into this state, it could become somewhat of a dangerous state. So off days are off days. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to be like totally gone, flying to a exotic destination. But what it does mean is find a way to escape your day-to-day routine habits and realities. So I work with people that say, Coach, I don't do that great taking a full day off. And I said, well, listen, let's do this. Let's give you 60 minutes in the morning of you time where you could kind of, I always look at business as a leaf pile. And when the wind blows, even if it blows a couple leaves off the pile, business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders, they get crazy. So let's just take that time. Let's take an hour and let's make sure all the leaves are corralled in the pile so that we can then go do whatever we want to do. But what I find today more than ever is if we let people, or if we suggest, hey, you're not doing anything, that could actually have a negative consequence psychologically. But I got this from Derek Jeter. When he took a day off, like he was gone at his lake house on jet skis, hanging out. He wasn't thinking about baseball. But then a player like A-Rod, he'd be studying some of his previous at bats. So I used to look at it like I was achieving well if I took a whole day off and I did nothing, and I was failing if I did something. I've modified to say, if you need that 60 minutes in the morning and it makes you feel good, you can have your coffee, your tea, or whatever, get your leaf pile together, and then go enjoy your day. You have to enjoy your day. Don't forget to enjoy your day and enjoy your life. And it can't just be, even if you love your work, you will come back better if you go do something else. And we can't forget that.
Awesome.
It's hard, man. That's the hardest thing I wrote in the whole book. That's for personally, that's my hardest habit.
I struggle with that mightily. So that's why when I read that, like I said, I mean, it makes sense. And then I read it, it kind of hit me in the guts. So I appreciate you
Yeah.
writing that. So it is hard. It is hard. But I also like the 60 minutes in the morning to get our leaf pile together and to get it in order before the house burns down. So
Yeah, it
that's
makes you
good.
feel good, right? I mean, at the end of the day, just
Absolutely.
knowing that, okay, I touched it. At least you touched it. Hey, I put my hand on it. I'm good. Now I can step away. If you don't do
Yeah.
that, it may be 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You're like, oh shoot, I forgot to do that. And then that owns you. I mean, at least a lot of the
Yeah.
the mindsets that I deal with, there's a bit of
Mhm.
obsessiveness that's there. there's perfectionism, all of that. There's even comparison that exists. So we can understand that, and we can put sort of a stop in place
Hmm.
for
Yep.
that.
Set those boundaries so that we can make it work for
Totally.
us.
Totally.
Yeah, I like that. I like
Yeah.
that. So I got to ask you a baseball question, Coach,
Okay, let's do it.
before we get you out of here, and that is, so I know you've worked with some of the best, but is there one guy who had amazing habits that you're surprised didn't turn into a Hall of Famer, maybe because they got injured or something happened to them that they didn't become who you expected, who you thought they might be possible?
Um, I would say, just trying to think about that because it's a very interesting question. Um, there was some minor league players that you've seen that with that um, they have all the potential in the world, but they just screw it up. And what happened? Like, I'll give you there was a player that most people won't know, but his name is Slade Heathcott, and he was a first round draft pick. I think he got signed for like $5.5 million with the Yankees. So when he came to training camp, he decided that he was going to make his own T-shirt, and the T-shirt said 5.5 on it. So great talent from Texas, fast, could hit for power, rocket arm, all of it. But he couldn't overcome his own, um, really his own desire to be seen and heard, but not for being a great player. He just wanted to be seen and heard. Another player, and that's the same story, but he made it to the big leagues, is Jabba Chamberlain.
Yeah.
Same type of thing, tremendous talent through 102, 103, but the lifestyle got the best of him, and he wasn't willing to do the work and instill the right habits within himself. He just loved the spotlight and being known as Jabba. Like, it was the Yankees, and then there was Jabba. And he was a great guy. I mean, he really, I enjoyed coaching him, but he had an affinity for the spotlight, and that hijacked his trajectory. And I
Mhm.
remember this story. We were at the All-Star game was in New York City. So I'm with our equipment guy, Rob Kakuza, and I'm with Derek Jeter. And we take a look over, and we see Jabba Chamberlain dancing at a table at the Roseland Ballroom. And Derek goes, "Hey, you see that guy over there?" I said, "Who, Jabba?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "He's going to be playing for the Kansas City Royals in the next 5 years." And sure enough, he wasn't on our team in the next 5 years. So it's easy to see players that get so caught up. And it's also easy to see, even in the world of business, or you look at social media, you see people that they're getting so caught up in the lifestyle that they're forgetting to execute on the fundamentals that create excellence in terms of results. So,
Yeah.
you got to find that balance.
Definitely, definitely. So, Coach, great book. Congratulations.
Thank you,
Habits of a
Phil.
Champion. It's a fantastic book. If you're going to take us home here with one thing that we can do today to get us started on the path to being a better champion, what would that be?
Man, that's a big question. But the one thing I would say is you have to start. Just start. Like, the way I begin everything is by jumping in. Like, jump in, make the mistakes, correct the mistakes, and jump in again. So you're constantly buying yourself back in as you're failing, only to succeed. And then you'll fail, and then you succeed. But it is the ability to jump in, right, and embrace failure, right? Those 7 times you get out for the 3 times you get a hit. So you have to start, though. And nobody becomes a champion on the sidelines, and nobody becomes a champion by reading books, right? You become that champion by getting in the game. You got to get in the game, and sometimes you get hit with the ball. Sometimes somebody throws at your head. Sometimes, you hit the ball hard, but it's an out. You can't let any of that get you down. It's just, and it sucks. And I go through it myself. I have these days where I feel like I'm manic, and it's like, what the heck, man? I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and the ball's not moving, right? I'm not moving it down the field. But I always remember a talk I had with Mark Teixeira, our first baseman, and he was struggling. He wasn't getting hits, and he was really sucking. And I said, Tex, what are you going to do differently? And he said, nothing. I'm just going to keep executing on my play. I'm going to keep executing on my routine. The results will be there. And, Phil, hey, sometimes the well's a little bit dry and sometimes it's nice and wet. So it doesn't mean when it dries up that you should just stop doing everything or do everything different, right? You may tweak something, but no drastic changes. But jump in,
Yeah,
play the game, and challenge yourself every day.
absolutely. Keep doing the work
Do
because
the work. Yeah.
if you got a good process, as you mentioned before, right? If I've got a good plan, work the plan, even though some days it doesn't work, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's not always going to work. It's over time, right? It's that success over time principle. And you look back on what you did the last 5 years and you say, hey, you know what? Out of those 5 years, I may have had 30 months that were complete dog shit. But you know what? The rest of those months, right? I did pretty good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Coach, great insight. Friends, if
Thank
you're
you.
listening, if you're watching, check out Dana, right? DanaCavalea.com. Check him out.
Yep.
He's got a great blog there. Lots of
Thank
great
you.
insight. He's on LinkedIn. And get the book, Habits of a Champion. Dana, thanks so much for your time today, man. I
Thanks.
really
Thanks.
enjoyed
Phil.
it.
Thank you.